Fiona was excited as she got ready for her date. This was her third date with Carl, and all the signs were good that Carl was going to get lucky for the first time tonight. She was getting excited with the anticipation of it. As she put the last of her makeup on, she thought about the first 2 dates. She'd met Carl when she went out almost a month ago with her friend Rachel. They had been planning on having just a quiet night to celebrate Rachel's birthday. However, when the 2 hunky guys bought them drinks and very persistently made their intentions of getting to know them better apparent, things changed. Rachel cracked first, and with a look at Fiona for approval, agreed to a couple of dances. That left Fiona with Carl. He was a perfect gentleman throughout the 4 dances she allowed him. It seemed natural that the 4 of them shared the table when they all returned. She had absolutely no idea what Rachel and her guy talked about. She had eyes only for Carl. He was handsome, witty, and a good 5 years younger than her. But the most alluring thing about him was that he made her the center of his universe. While she was in his presence, she had his undivided attention. It was very flattering. By the end of the evening, she was seriously considering relaxing her long-held standards of never sleeping with a guy she didn't love. She knew she would regret that later, and it sent wholly the wrong message. Fortunately, Carl relieved her of that problem by calling an end to the night. He explained that he had an early start at work the next day. Perfect gentleman that he was, he settled both girls' tabs for them before leading them out to Fiona's car. He drew her in for a short kiss on the lips, then bid her good night. She was a little surprised when Rachel announced she was going home with Carl's friend to his apartment. She knew Rachel had lower standards than she did, but this was still unusual behavior. Fiona returned home alone, very excited, with anticipation of the future. Once out of Carl's mesmeric presence, her natural cynicism allowed the first crack to appear in her dream. What were the odds that someone as good as Carl was unattached? She had automatically checked for a wedding ring and been relieved by its absence, but she couldn't help remembering the cynic's mantra. Girls, if you meet a single guy who is handsome, muscular, attentive, and sensitive, don't waste your time. He no doubt already has a boyfriend. However, she knew Carl wasn't gay. When she'd pressed up against him during that last dance, she had definitely felt something. She would never normally be so presumptuous during a first meeting, but she instinctively knew that she couldn't let this one get away. With her obvious interest in Carl, an impartial observer may have been confused as to why she didn't agree on a second date with him until 11 days later. He had called at least every second day and obviously returned her attraction. Her second date was again with Rachel and was in the same bar as last time. Carl and his friend were already there. He greeted Fiona with a very friendly kiss, and again the 4 split into 2 pairs at the same table. It was half an hour later that Fiona managed to pull away from his closeness to examine his left hand. A shudder of disappointment went through her as she saw the faint shadow on his ring finger. "You're married, you cheating jerk. I knew you were too good to be true." "Oh, you mean this," said Carl, holding up his ring finger. "I was married until 6 months ago, but unfortunately it failed. As it is winter and I have an office job, the paleness has yet to be tanned out." Relieved and a little afraid of the damage her outburst may have done to their burgeoning relationship, Fiona quickly apologized. She then just as quickly decided to use all her charms to repair any damage. Dragging Carl onto the dance floor, she pressed up against him. He accepted her apology by leaning down and pulling her in for a kiss. They ended up dancing and kissing until the bar closed at midnight. Neither had any idea when Rachel and Carl's friend had left, but their table was empty when they finally returned. Fiona was caught in a dilemma almost as old as time itself. She really wanted to ensnare Carl by taking him to her bed right now. However, she wasn't interested in just a short-term fling. By giving in tonight, she knew she risked losing his respect if he was interested in a longer-term relationship. She decided he would have to work harder for his reward. Besides, that would allow him to further demonstrate his need for her. Nothing stroked her ego like being chased by a man. It was at least as good a thrill as the first intimacy with a new partner. After gently letting him down, she allowed him again to escort her to her car. This time they passionately kissed goodnight. Proud of her self-control, she returned home. Over the next 2 weeks, Fiona basked in the glow of being pursued. Carl rang her a minimum of once a day. Every second or third day, he sent either flowers or chocolates to her office. That was one of the reasons she didn't agree to a third date until 15 days after the second. She sensed Carl was becoming despondent of his chances. Desperate not to lose him, she immediately agreed to a date. Now, here she was, sitting at her makeup table wondering whether tonight was going to be the night. This time there was no Rachel, and they met at a different bar. Fiona knew she was running a risk when she asked him again if he was married. She prefaced the question as her not believing that such a good-looking guy was available. She saw a flicker in his eye that she interpreted as meaning that he had been hurt by her question. She immediately gave him her best kiss. "Look, Fee, how can I prove to you that I'm not?" he asked. "Easy. We'll dance for a while, then you can take me back to your place." Any misgivings Carl may have held rapidly blew away, and he drew her in for another smoldering kiss. At a table at the other end of the bar, Tom observed the couple closely. He hadn't observed this couple interact before. He judged with an eye tuned by years of watching couples. "Third date, I reckon. She's just told him he's going to score tonight. He would follow them tonight just to confirm his judgment. If he was lucky, they might couple somewhere he could not only watch, but take some photos and videos for his growing collection." With that anticipation, his heart raced. On the dance floor, the happy couple had almost given up all pretense of sticking to the beat of the music in favor of embracing and tongue-dueling. A mere 45 minutes after they had arrived, Carl hustled Fiona out to his car and drove her away. Tom was already waiting in his own car and, with practiced ease, followed them to an apartment a mere 10 minutes' drive away. Fiona stood impatiently while Carl fumbled to find the right key to open the door. He finally managed it with the third one. Fiona was breathing heavily with anticipation. Once the door was closed and the happy couple was inside, Tom strolled from his place of concealment behind a tree on the street and made his way around to the back of the 3 apartment blocks. With experience, he looked around at the high wooden fences surrounding the block and judged that he wouldn't be observed in his spying. He could see through the partially open curtains, through the darkened bedroom into the lounge. Carl and Fiona were in the midst of tearing each other's clothes off. Tom opened his belt bag and retrieved his video camera. He was disappointed that the action was in the lounge, but realized it could have been far worse. The curtains might have been closed. He got some really good footage of Carl with Fiona. She must have been excited, as it only took about 2 minutes. At the window, Tom thought this was priceless. For less than 5 minutes of his time, he had both of them on tape. He was even more excited when the happy couple moved into the bedroom and turned the bedside light on but didn't close the curtains. He stepped away from the light escaping through the curtains until he judged from experience that they were fully occupied again. He had just confirmed that Carl had Fiona on her back in the bed when it happened. The distinctive snap of a dry twig breaking under someone's stealthy foot. He backed into the shadows while judging that the noise had come from the brush about 10 meters to his left. It was an occupational hazard of his activities that he sometimes wasn't the only watcher. It never failed to embarrass him, though. He wasn't particularly proud of what he did. Frozen in the shadows, Tom sensed another figure approaching the dim pool of light he'd just vacated. Soon, the figure of another man stood in the light and peered into the window. As soon as the full light from the bedroom hit his face, Tom grinned. "Hi, Greg!" Instinctively, Greg crouched below the windowsill and peered into the shadows. "Tom, you almost gave me a heart attack. What the hell are you doing here?" "Same as you, Greg. Same as you." "Any good?" Greg asked. "Yeah, fantastic. You missed the action in the lounge, but they've just moved here to the bedroom. He's going at it again." "Any video?" Greg asked. "Sure have. I'll give you a copy if you like." "That would be great, Tom." Greg peered through the crack in the curtain and grinned. "Excuse me, I just have to make a phone call." As his fellow peeper retreated to make the call, Tom once again returned to the crack with his camera rolling, once again thinking of his good fortune. This would be one of the best items in his collection. By the time Greg got back, Fiona had once again burst into excitement, and Carl was returned to full duty. Tom got brilliant footage of both their faces, clearly showing their mutual pleasure. When Greg returned, Tom kindly made room so they could both video the action. In whispers and with an expert eye, they shared views on Carl's performance. It must have been about 15 minutes later when they were both startled by a pounding on the apartment door, clearly audible even at the back of the building. Their reaction was nothing to Fiona and Carl's. They separated with looks of confusion, and both hurriedly started dressing. Carl finished first, even with the difficulty he had pushing into his jeans. Greg and Tom watched as Carl left the bedroom and disappeared from view at the front door. Mere seconds later, they were astonished to see him flying backwards and landing in the center of the lounge. Very soon afterward, a large, obviously angry woman raced over to stand over the recumbent lover, laying into him with gusto with a short mini-league baseball bat. Carl's screams came faintly through the glass. When she tired of this, the formidable woman turned her attention to the bedroom. Fiona nearly got the door closed but was no match for the bigger woman. She retreated backward until the bed hit her knees and she fell back on it. With a snarl, the strange woman repeated her performance and laid into Fiona with a will. Both peepers could plainly hear the screams and the interspersed commentary. The videos had been good before, but now both Tom and Greg knew they would be taking pride of place in their collections. Tom could see that no real damage was being done with the dense foam bat. Obviously bored, the woman stopped her beating and returned to the front door. Greg sprinted around the block, followed by Tom. Neither wanted to miss a second of this drama. Greg got to the front door just as the large woman opened it and came out, throwing it over her shoulder. "If your friend John knew why you were using his apartment, then you'd better tell him to start running as well." When she heard his reply, she turned and strode back through the door. This was the opportunity Fiona had been waiting for. She bolted out the door and ran full tilt into Tom standing at the gate. Bouncing off, she reached both hands forward to grab him. This was a reflex to stop herself from falling over backward again. Quick as a flash, Tom grabbed one of her arms with one of his, but used the other to thrust the envelope into her free hand. With obvious amusement, he stated, "Fiona Brown, you have been served. Your husband requests your immediate presence at his house." Fiona rushed past him and screamed off down the street. Tom returned his attention to the entertainment still playing out in the house. Greg strolled over. "Nicely done, Tom. Short and sharp." "Yeah, the husband authorized me to do it as soon as I had the evidence. Poor woman. It was her first time. Talk about unlucky." "Oh well, stuff happens. Don't forget the video you owe me," Greg answered. At this point, the formidable lady came out the door again and walked up to Greg. "Did you get what I wanted?" "Sure did," Greg replied. "Who's this guy? I'm not paying for two of you, you know." "That's fine. We private investigators always work alone. Tom here has just served your husband's girlfriend." "Good. That saves me the job of finding his address and sending him the video." She returned to the door and yelled inside. "You may as well stay here, jerk. Certainly don't bother coming home. You don't live there anymore." 200 meters away, Fiona was still accelerating. It finally dawned on her that it would take her a good hour and a half to walk back to her car. In the heels she was wearing, that would be a big ask. There was no way she was going anywhere near the apartment and that frightening woman again. Her racing, overloaded brain finally remembered her phone, but she quickly found it had been a casualty of her beating. Sobbing, with envelope in hand, she limped into the night. It ended up taking 2.5 hours to get back to her car and drive home. She was confused. Why did her husband want her to go back to their house? He was away on one of the business trips he took every 2 weeks or so. Bruised, battered, tired, and sore, she noticed the lights were all on. She fumbled her house key in the lock on the front door. She must be tired. She couldn't get it to go in the hole. The noise alerted her husband, and he opened the door, standing to the side to let her stagger in. "What are you doing home, honey?" she started. "Who is this?" The attractive but stern-looking lady sitting on her couch arose and approached the silent pair. "I am Mary Vermont, from Child Services. Do you know it is entirely inappropriate to leave a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old child alone for—" She glanced at her watch. "4 hours. I'm afraid I'll have to report this disgusting situation to the relevant authorities. I have here an interim order that precludes you from having sole custody of your children. The order remains in place for 28 days or until overturned by a family court magistrate." Rather than accept the proffered paper, Fiona collapsed to the floor. The extent of her husband's ministrations was to roll her into the recovery position to prevent her from swallowing her tongue in her swoon. He couldn't have worn a more distasteful expression when he touched her if he'd been scooping up dog poo with his bare hands. There was a knock at the door. Fiona's husband admitted her mother, who looked at her prostrate daughter with concern, but made no move towards her. "Is what you said on the phone right?" she asked. "Yes, Mum. Tonight was at least the second night that she has left the kids home alone while she went out. The first time, I only found out when the lady next door rang me. Rita had woken up with a nightmare and wouldn't stop until she saw her mum. Jenny went next door to get help. The lady came over and settled Rita and stayed until Fiona got home after midnight. When she heard Fiona coming, she snuck out the back door. She rang me the next day. I rang Child Services and we set up a fake business trip for this week. Mary noted what time Fiona left and confirmed there was no babysitter. Don't worry, the girls knew I wasn't far away, and I came back as soon as Fiona left. I was also tipped off by Rachel's husband that they were up to no good. We are sharing a lawyer." "I can confirm all that, Mrs. Smith. We already have a statement from the neighbor, and tomorrow we will get one from her friend. I'm afraid tonight I had her followed by a private investigator, who filmed her leaving a bar, going to some guy's house and having intimacy with him." Fiona's mum digested all this with a look of mounting horror. The other two let her process. Finally, "I know you well enough that you will never forgive her this. Damn. I don't think I will ever forgive her either. I am so embarrassed that a child of mine would do anything remotely like this. Don't worry, Mum. None of this reflects on you. Please feel free to visit your grandchildren as often as you like. They will need some stability after the shock of all this hits. She can stay on my medical insurance for the time being. She'll at least need counseling. Please forgive me in advance for not giving her much in the divorce. I will need it all if I take a reduction in hours or hire a nanny. Now let me help you get her into your car. Actually, before we do that, can you ladies confirm that she already has extensive bruising to her legs, arms, and face?" "Yes, Dave," the two women replied in unison. Fiona sat in the back of the courtroom, her eyes glazed, trying to focus on the proceedings that were unfolding before her. The weight of the past few weeks bore down on her, each passing moment reminding her of the lies, the betrayal, and the slow unraveling of the life she had once thought was unbreakable. The glances from her family, her husband's cold gaze. It was all too much to bear. She could feel the walls closing in, the last traces of her old life slipping through her fingers. Across the room, her husband, Dave, sat at the front with an air of quiet satisfaction. His lawyer spoke with confidence, securing the terms of the divorce and the temporary custody of the children. Dave had always been the strong, silent type, but now the cracks in his stoic exterior were gone. He was a man reborn, a man who had seen through the charade, who had finally taken control of his life. As Fiona's lawyer tried to salvage what little was left of her dignity, Dave's expression softened for the first time in weeks. His thoughts turned to the moment when he had confronted Fiona. The look of shock and shame on her face, the way she had tried to twist the truth. But now, with everything laid bare, there was no more deception. He was free. He had moved on from the lies, the pain, and the endless betrayal. Fiona's eyes darted nervously to the door as it opened. Her mother entered the room, her face pale and strained. Fiona had hoped for some semblance of support, but her mother's disappointment was impossible to ignore. She had known all along, hadn't she? Fiona's reckless behavior, the affairs, the manipulation. Nothing was hidden anymore. The truth had taken root, and there was no escaping it. Dave stood up, his back straight, a sense of pride radiating from him. The judge's words felt like a distant hum in the background as he turned to Fiona. His eyes, once filled with confusion and doubt, were now clear, full of resolve and strength. The decision had been made. Fiona would no longer have control over his life. With a calm, almost relieved smile, Dave walked out of the courtroom. His hands gripped the doorframe for a moment, the weight of the victory settling in. He had fought for his children, for his peace, and for his future. Fiona, on the other hand, was left in the dust, alone, broken, and struggling to make sense of a life that had crumbled beneath her. Outside, the sun shone brightly, the promise of a fresh start waiting for Dave. He had already begun to rebuild, knowing that the best days of his life were still ahead. As he drove away from the courthouse, he thought of the children, their laughter, and the quiet joy that awaited him at home. They would be okay. He would make sure of it. Meanwhile, Fiona sat alone, the echoes of her own mistakes reverberating in her mind. Her phone buzzed with yet another notification, another reminder that the world had moved on without her. Her friends, her family, even Carl, none of them were waiting for her. They had all seen through her charades. The woman she had once been, the one who could command attention, was gone. All that was left was a hollow shell of the person she used to be. As the final moments of the day slipped away, Fiona knew there was no way to turn back. She had lost everything, and there was no one left to blame but herself. The path ahead was dark, filled with regret and isolation. Meanwhile, Dave's world was brightening, each day promising a better future. He had found his peace, and Fiona had only herself to answer to now. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.